I was standing in front of 312 pharmaceutical logistics executives in a ballroom in Denver when my phone lit up on the podium. Mid-sentence, slide 21 of 26 on the screen behind me. The room quiet, except for my voice explaining why a $47 million cold chain distribution network in the Southeast was structurally guaranteed to hemorrhage money within 14 months. The notification sat on my lock screen like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Your return flight has been canceled. You're resourceful. Figure it out. I read it twice. Then a second message rolled in underneath. Hotel checkout is tomorrow at 11. Corporate card has been deactivated. Good luck. 1,800 miles from home. No flight, no hotel past morning, no company credit card. While I stood on a stage presenting work that my CEO had never once understood, but had spent 2.5 years claiming as her own intellectual contribution to the company. I looked up from the podium and found her, third row, left side, arms crossed, that particular smile I'd memorized over 29 months, the one that said she was enjoying this, the one that said she'd been planning this. I closed my laptop. The projector went to the default blue screen. 300 people stared at me in confused silence. I apologize. I need to step away. The complete methodology is in your handout packets. Pages 14 through 31 contain everything I just covered and the supporting data for everything I didn't get to. Then I walked off stage, past her smile, through the double doors, into the convention center corridor where the recycled air tasted like industrial carpet cleaner and something that might have been freedom. What Nadine Calloway did not know, what she could not possibly have anticipated, was that I had been quietly preparing for exactly this kind of moment for the past 9 months. Not because I predicted she'd cancel my flight, because I'd spent enough time studying who she really was to know that eventually she'd overplay her hand. And when she did, I intended to be ready with everything I needed to make sure she never did it to anyone else. Before I go any further, I want to pause and say something to you directly. If you're listening to this and you've ever had someone steal your work, take credit for your ideas, or try to make you feel small so they could feel powerful, this story is for you. I'm building this channel for people who understand what it feels like to be invisible in a room full of people profiting from your labor. I'm working toward my first 1,000 subscribers, and those first 1,000 are the foundation of everything this becomes. If this resonates, hit subscribe right now. Be part of that foundation, because stories like this one need to be heard by people who need to know they're not alone. All right, let me take you back to where this actually began. My name is Nola Prescott. I was 33 years old when everything I'm about to describe happened. I'm a pharmaceutical supply chain analyst, which sounds like a mouthful until you understand what it actually means. I spend my days running predictive models on medication distribution networks, figuring out whether a logistics company's promises match physical reality, whether their refrigerated trucks can actually maintain pharmaceutical-grade temperatures during August in Georgia, whether their delivery schedules account for rural population gaps that turn a 48-hour timeline into a 72-hour disaster. I took the position at Kendrick Pharmaceutical Solutions after 4 years at a healthcare startup that slowly imploded and left me with 2 months of bounced paychecks and a desperate craving for stability. Corporate pharma distribution seemed perfect. Show up, run the numbers, identify which proposals would fail before anyone wasted millions implementing them, go home. The woman who hired me was Nadine Calloway, CEO, 14 years of industry connections, board relationships going back to before I graduated college. During the interview, she asked smart questions about predictive modeling and risk assessment frameworks, seemed genuinely interested in the technical work, seemed like someone who understood that the mathematics behind logistics mattered more than the politics. I was wrong about that. Profoundly, catastrophically wrong. First week on the job, Nadine handed me a distribution network proposal and said, "Run the projections, flag anything concerning." I spent 5 days on it. The logistics firm had based their entire cold chain timeline on temperature assumptions that violated basic thermodynamics. Their cost model ignored infrastructure limitations documented in publicly available DOT reports. I wrote a 16-page assessment explaining precisely why their project would exceed budget by 41% and fail FDA inspection before reaching operational status. Nadine read it in her office while I sat across from her. When she finished, she looked up with genuine admiration. "This is exceptional, Nola. Truly outstanding work. Would you mind if I present this to the board? You're still new here. Might land better if it comes from executive leadership initially. Just this once." She was the CEO. I was 6 days in. It seemed reasonable, seemed like mentorship. She presented every word as her own analysis. The board rejected the proposal based on her presentation. An alternative distributor completed the contract under budget. Nadine got profiled in a trade publication for her, quote, rigorous analytical approach to supply chain risk management. I received nothing, not acknowledgement, not a mention, not even a thank you email. I told myself it was fine, learning the ropes, understanding corporate dynamics, being patient. Then it happened again and again and again. The pattern crystallized over months like frost forming on glass. I would spend weeks modeling risk variables for cold chain logistics, medication storage facilities, regional distribution hub viability. I'd write comprehensive assessments explaining not just whether something would fail, but exactly how the failure would cascade through timelines and budgets and regulatory compliance. Nadine would read them, compliment my thoroughness, then present them in board meetings I was never invited to attend. My analysis, her name, every single time. But something started developing that Nadine never anticipated. Regional operations directors began reaching out to me directly, not officially, just quiet questions about proposals they were reviewing. "Nadine says this logistics partner is solid, but something feels wrong about their capacity numbers. You worked on this assessment, right?" A senior operations director named Grace Alderman called about a Midwest expansion project 7 months into my tenure. I'd flagged critical problems with the distributor's fleet capacity calculations. Their model assumed uniform delivery density across a region with concentrated urban centers and rural gaps exceeding 80 miles. Medication would expire in transit. I'd written 24 pages explaining exactly why. "That's not what Nadine told the board," Grace said after I walked her through my actual findings. She presented a 4-page summary saying it was approvable with minor schedule adjustments. "Grace, I recommended outright rejection with current specifications." Long silence on the line. "I never saw your recommendation, just hers." After that call, I started investigating, reached out to operations directors on other projects I'd assessed. Identical pattern every time. Nadine was presenting condensed versions of my work that frequently contradicted my actual conclusions. When I recommended rejection, she softened it to approvable with modifications. When I flagged major risk, she relabeled it minor concerns requiring monitoring. She wasn't just stealing credit, she was actively misrepresenting my technical findings to appear agreeable and collaborative with logistics partners, building political capital by approving proposals that should never have been approved, and she was doing it using my credibility as raw material, spending my accuracy to purchase her reputation. I couldn't confront her directly. She was the CEO with 14 years of board relationships and industry connections that made her practically untouchable. Direct confrontation would end my career before it scratched hers. So I did something different. I became meticulously, obsessively helpful to every single person who contacted me. Every operations director who needed technical clarification got a comprehensive walkthrough. Every logistics partner who wanted to understand why their proposal failed got a page-by-page explanation.
I was building something Nadine couldn't see, couldn't control, and wouldn't understand until it was far too late.
22 months in, Nadine called me to her office with an offer that should have raised every alarm I had. There's a national pharmaceutical logistics conference in Denver next month. I want you to present our risk assessment methodology on stage. I stared at her. She had never let me present anything publicly, ever. She guarded visibility the way some people guard money. You want me to present? Demonstrate the framework, show the industry what we're capable of. It's excellent exposure for the company. I should have been suspicious. I was too hungry for recognition to think clearly. I'd be glad to. Wonderful. I'll handle the travel arrangements. The conference was massive. Pharmaceutical executives and logistics partners from 38 states. Billions in future distribution contracts would be negotiated in those hallways. This was where industry reputations were built. Nadine registered both of us, booked flights and accommodations. Then 2 days before departure, she announced a scheduling conflict. Board obligations. Couldn't attend after all. I'd represent the company alone. This is your moment, Nola. Make us shine. I spent the entire flight preparing. My presentation covered our complete methodology using real project examples, temperature variance analysis, cold chain timeline modeling, the mathematical frameworks that made our risk assessments genuinely predictive instead of decorative. It was thorough, technically rigorous, and honest. Day 1, 3:15 p.m. Main ballroom. I saw Grace Alderman in the 7th row, a few other operations directors I recognized, mostly logistics executives and pharma analysts I'd never met, and in the back of the room, standing near the exit, a woman I didn't recognize taking careful notes. I progressed through 21 slides, demonstrated how we'd identified cold chain failures in the Southeast, explained the mathematics behind capacity risk modeling. My voice was steady, the room was engaged, questions were sharp and genuine. This was the most visible I had been in over 2 years. Then my phone lit up on the podium. Your return flight has been canceled. You're resourceful. Figure it out. I stopped speaking, located Nadine in the 3rd row. She'd come after all, and she was smiling. Second message. Hotel checkout is tomorrow at 11. Corporate card has been deactivated. Good luck. She'd sent me here to present technical work she didn't understand, let me have the visibility she'd always denied me, then pulled the floor out beneath my feet, wanted me stranded, humiliated, desperate, begging for help 1,800 miles from home so she could demonstrate exactly how much power she held over my professional existence. I closed my laptop, said I needed to step away, directed the room to the handout packets, walked off stage without looking at her. In the convention center corridor, I stood against a concrete pillar and breathed for 30 seconds. My hands were shaking, but my mind was perfectly, dangerously clear. Then I noticed the woman from the back of the room. She'd followed me out. Tall, silver hair, glasses pushed up on her forehead. She was holding my handout packet with several pages already dog-eared. That was an unexpected exit, she said. Unexpected circumstances. I noticed. She extended her hand. Vivian O'Coffer, I'm the Executive Director of the National Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Standards Board, the organization that certified which companies were qualified to manage large-scale medication distribution contracts, the body whose approval meant accessing billion-dollar networks and being locked out of the industry entirely. Nola Prescott, I shook her hand. Can we talk somewhere? I have something you need to hear. We sat in uncomfortable lobby chairs near a window overlooking the parking structure. I told Vivian everything. Not emotionally, clinically, precisely, the way I'd present a risk assessment. Here is how Nadine presents my work. Here are my actual conclusions. Here is the documentation I've maintained for 9 months, and here is what happened to the projects where she overrode my recommendations. I opened my laptop and showed her time-stamped files, email chains with operations directors, the Midwest distribution calculations that contradicted what Nadine had told the board, calculations that later proved accurate when the project began hemorrhaging money exactly as I'd predicted. Vivian read through everything without speaking.
7 minutes of silence broken only by her occasionally adjusting her glasses. "This is systematic misrepresentation," she said finally. "She's falsifying technical capabilities to pharmaceutical clients." "I know. What do you want from this conversation?" I'd been thinking about this during my walk from the ballroom. "Nothing immediately, but I want you to have this information. I believe it's going to become relevant." She handed me her business card, heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. "Stay in touch, Nola. This conversation isn't over." That night, I couldn't afford to extend my hotel stay. Nadine had booked the cheapest, non-refundable rate. The hotel conference was $340 per night. I called Grace Alderman, who laughed and said her colleague had canceled last minute. I could have the spare bed. Grace's remaining roommate was an operations director named Terrence from a Philadelphia distribution company. The three of us stayed up past midnight comparing methodologies. I showed them my original assessments versus Nadine's modified versions. Terrence studied the Midwest analysis for 15 minutes in complete silence. "This is dramatically more rigorous than what we've been receiving through official channels. Why isn't your name anywhere on this?" "Because my CEO presents it as her expertise." Grace shook her head slowly. "We've been making decisions worth tens of millions of dollars based on what we believed was Nadine's analytical judgment, but it's yours." "I know. You need to go independent," Terrence said. "Companies would hire you directly." "I don't have executive credentials." "You have 2 years of accurate predictions that saved companies millions. That's worth more than any title." The seed planted itself deep. I took a shuttle to the airport and slept on terminal chairs waiting for standby seats. Arrived home 41 hours after walking off that stage. Exhausted, furious, and strangely, impossibly calm. Monday morning, I discovered Nadine had relocated my office while I was gone. My workspace on the 4th floor, near the operations team, was now occupied by a new hire. My files sat in bankers' boxes in the basement corridor. My new office had no windows, fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly, and a faint smell of cleaning chemicals that never fully dissipated. "How was Denver?" Nadine smiled when I passed her in the hallway. "Productive." "Wonderful. I'm reorganizing departmental workflow. You'll be working from the lower level going forward. Better for focused analytical work, fewer distractions." Translation: buried, out of sight, cut off from the operations directors whose trust I'd been building. "Understood," I said. Then I carried my boxes downstairs and started building my exit in absolute silence. 9 months of preparation meant becoming strategically invisible in a way that made me quietly indispensable to everyone except Nadine. Every logistics partner who called for technical clarification received detailed, honest explanations with follow-up documentation bearing my name. Every operations director who needed help understanding a rejected proposal got walked through the mathematics, page by page. I wasn't building relationships for Nadine anymore. I was building them for myself, one honest answer at a time. Nadine couldn't see it happening because I was in the basement, out of her sightline, below her notice, exactly where she wanted me, which was exactly where I needed to be. 4 months after Denver, Grace called with news that made everything accelerate. "That Midwest distribution expansion you flagged, the one Nadine approved despite your recommendation, it's failing. Exactly how you predicted. Rural delivery gaps are causing medication temperature excursions. The company's facing $4.1 million in losses and potential federal compliance violations." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Nadine's blaming the logistics partner, says they deviated from approved specifications." "Did they?" "No. They built exactly what they proposed. Nadine just approved it after stripping your warnings from the assessment." "Do you have my original analysis?" "No, only Nadine's summary, the one that called it minimal risk." I sent Grace my 24-page original within 10 minutes, the one documenting the capacity problem, the population distribution data, the specific pharmaceutical stability thresholds, the calculations showing precisely why medication would degrade in rural corridors. The assessment Nadine had condensed into 3 paragraphs that removed every technical warning. Grace went quiet after reading it. When she spoke again, her voice carried a different weight. "I'm sharing this with the board. That's your decision. This isn't about credit anymore, Nola. She misrepresented technical risk to this board. We made multi-million-dollar commitments based on falsified information. That's not politics. That's fraud." 3 weeks later, the board of directors issued a formal request. They wanted every original assessment I'd produced over 29 months, unmodified, complete with calculations, notes, and methodology documentation. I sent everything. 93 assessments, hundreds of pages, every risk I'd identified, every recommendation I'd made, every conclusion Nadine had altered before presenting it as her own expert judgment. The investigation took 6 weeks. I wasn't invited to participate, wasn't asked for testimony, but Grace kept me informed through careful calls where she chose her words like someone aware that conversations might be reviewed later. The results were devastating. 17 major projects approved over 29 months. I'd recommended rejection or significant modification on 12 of them. Nadine had overridden 9 of my recommendations. 6 were now experiencing exactly the problems I'd predicted. The company faced $13.8 million in additional costs because Nadine had systematically misrepresented technical risk to maintain industry relationships. She was approving proposals to look collaborative, building political capital by being the reasonable CEO who worked well with logistics partners, and she was purchasing that reputation with my technical accuracy, spending my credibility like currency she'd never have to repay. 5 months after I sent those original assessments, Vivian Okafor called me on a Wednesday afternoon. "I've been thinking about our conversation in Denver, about assessment integrity in pharmaceutical distribution." "All right." "We're implementing new certification requirements. Every company managing major medication distribution contracts needs certified risk assessors, not the company name on letterhead, the actual human beings performing the technical analysis." My hand tightened on the phone. "I want you on the certification review board. You'd evaluate whether assessors genuinely understand the work they're claiming credit for. Part-time initially, 3 days per month." "I'm not executive level, Vivian." "You're the most technically competent analyst I've encountered in 20 years. You do actual risk assessment, not political summarization dressed up as expertise. That's precisely what this board needs." I accepted. The compensation was modest, but it came with something money couldn't buy: legitimacy. A title backed by the organization that determined who accessed billion-dollar distribution networks. 8 months later, the new certification requirements went into effect. Every pharmaceutical distribution company in the country had to submit assessor credentials for review. Not their proposals, their people. The actual individuals claiming technical expertise had to prove they possessed it. The application required methodology documentation, sample work with calculations, demonstrated competency in risk assessment frameworks. It was designed to separate people who understood the work from people who performed understanding. Nadine's company submitted on schedule. She listed herself as lead technical assessor, primary analyst on every major project from the past 3 years. She attached excerpts from my Milwaukee cold chain analysis, passages from my Midwest distribution assessment, sections lifted directly from my Denver conference presentation, all submitted as evidence of her personal methodology. Her application landed on my review docket 4 weeks later. I should have recused myself. Instead, I flagged the conflict of interest to Vivian, who assembled an independent verification panel but kept me on the primary review. You're the only person who knows the technical history here. We need your initial assessment. The independent panel verifies everything afterward. This is about competency, not personal grievance. I reviewed Nadine's submission that evening. It was impressive. Sophisticated framework, thorough methodology, accurate calculations, all of it mine. Every word written in that basement office while she collected recognition upstairs. The certification required an in-person technical demonstration, live problem solving, proof that the person claiming expertise could actually perform the work they described. Nadine arrived confident, professional attire, that familiar smile. She thought this was a formality. Walk us through how you evaluated capacity risk on the Midwest distribution project, I said. Neutral voice, clinical. She explained the framework perfectly. My framework, memorized structure, polished delivery. Now demonstrate the actual calculation. How did you model medication expiration risk for rural delivery corridors? The smile tightened. I'd need to reference the original assessment for those specific values. You wrote the methodology. You shouldn't need references for your own work. I focus on strategic oversight. My team handles detailed calculations. Your application lists you as primary technical assessor, not a supervisor. She couldn't explain the mathematics, couldn't solve the risk modeling problems we presented, couldn't demonstrate understanding of the framework she'd claimed to develop. She could describe what competent analysis looked like, she could not perform it.
The interview lasted 52 minutes. She left without the smile. Certification denied. Reapplication eligible in 24 months after implementing proper assessment protocols and demonstrating genuine technical competency. For 2 years, Nadine's company was locked out of every major pharmaceutical distribution contract in the country. She fought the decision, called in favors, told people I'd sabotaged her out of jealousy. Those people called me. Grace was first. Is this legitimate or personal? She failed a technical competency review confirmed by 3 independent assessors. The full report is public record. She says you orchestrated this because she moved your office. Grace, you've seen my work for 2 years. You've seen her summaries of my work. You've seen what happens when she overrides my recommendations. The Midwest project is still bleeding money. Is this sabotage or accurate assessment? Long silence. It's accurate, but it's also personal. Can it be both? Yeah, I suppose it can. Nadine's company revenue dropped 43% within 9 months. The board restructured leadership. She kept a ceremonial title, no direct reports, no project authority, no power. I went independent, built a consulting practice on the reputation I'd earned one honest technical conversation at a time. Grace's company hired me to audit their portfolio. Terrence brought me to Philadelphia to train his team. Vivian expanded my board role to 4 days per week. Same work I'd always done, running projections, identifying failures before they happened. Now my name was on every page. My conclusions stood as written. Nobody edited them into something more politically convenient. At an industry conference 18 months later, Nadine approached me during a reception. That old smile. Rehearsed warmth. No hard feelings, I hope? Business is business. No hard feelings, I said. Professional. Pleasant. Completely detached. She walked away, and I watched her move through the room. People were polite. Nobody sought her out. Nobody asked for her analysis or her opinion on pending projects. She was present, but fundamentally irrelevant, a ghost attending her own professional afterlife. She'd tried to strand me 1,800 miles from home to teach me my place. Instead, she'd handed me the exact audience I needed to dismantle the false reputation she'd built on my work. She didn't lose because I destroyed her. She lost because I asked one question she couldn't answer. Can you show me how this calculation works? In an industry where truth lives in the data, that question changes everything. If you've ever had your work stolen or been made to feel invisible while someone else took credit for what you built, remember this. Competency always surfaces. It just needs time, documentation, and the right moment. And when that moment arrives, the truth doesn't whisper, it echoes.
I share stories like this every day. Real people who discovered that their expertise was their greatest weapon and their silence was their greatest strategy. If that resonates, hit subscribe, drop a comment about a time someone underestimated you, and I'll see you in the next one.